We rehearse here at my house, and it's sort of like a monastery at times. We can really kind of tap into our creative powers.
That's great. Did we get paid for the last gig yet?
And nobody knows what the hell I'm talking about. Boy, you guys disappoint me. All right, forget that one, Dave. That was actually from Chicago at Caribou Ranch.
Giant on the volume.
Oh, really?
Yes, it was.
Oh, I would just watch that.
When
last
Robert Lamb says it's like a monastery here, and never.
Wow.
This is
No one-
this isn't
no one-
Chicago's
But then there was
Max.
just
I got
too much
nothing.
cocaine going on.
Just watched it again last night for the first time.
So what's your favorite color and shape? It's always a bad icebreaker.
There are 10 of us here, and to be quite honest, there's been some players who've had some changes, but the chemistry and the personalities really work really well together. I mean, Artie is a fabulous jazz musician. He really, really is. Bubba is just a tremendous trumpet player. He copies Lee Lochnane's sound like nobody else. I mean, just he's right there. And I think what we've really been able to do, at least from my perspective, is develop a friendship and a working relationship and a respect for each other that goes far beyond my wildest dreams, quite honestly. When we first put this band together, my son said to me, he said, "We can do this. We can do this." And I looked, I said, "No way we can do this. It's way too hard." But once we got the right guys, and we all kind of formed a little bit of a brotherhood together, well, we're doing it. And it's really good. Even when it's bad, it's good. Right?
Right.
When who's bad?
When it's
Even when I'm bad, it's good.
opinions.
Hearing the same story over and over and over.
And over.
Yeah, but he's the oldest one in the band, so we forgive him.
Yeah.
We could talk about him because he's not
No,
here.
he's not.
He's not.
Oh, he's got you got him beat.
I got him beat.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
good for you.
I'm the old one. It's not a good place to be.
But you know, I think, maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think because we are all a little bit older, except for Ray, that doing this now, playing this music now, is sort of like, okay, Chicago's in their 70s and they're still doing it, and they're still kicking ass doing it. So when we do it, we try to imitate them as much as we possibly can with that enthusiasm. And it's sort of like you just, you get a reality check to say, I can't do this forever, so I better enjoy it now. And enjoy it as much as I can.
Yeah, you know something. If there's one thing that people will see when they come to listen to us and watch us, they're going to see the joy. Because you know, I think I can speak for everybody, man. From the first note to the last, it's just fun.
Yeah.
So.
We used to rehearse like that. We used to rehearse.
That's how we started.
Yeah, it's really just a rhythm section, and then
how we
sometimes even
started.
without the vocals, right? And then we
Yep.
kind of added in the vocals, and part of it was how the band got built. We started with a rhythm section. You know, we kind of joined together as a rhythm section, and then found players, and you know, somebody knew somebody else, and next thing you know, you get 10 people. But yeah, I mean, that's how it started, and I think in retrospect, it was like it was a really good way to kind of learn the music, and you know, most of us were used to playing that music. Maybe at a club once in a while in a cover band, but usually just to the record. So you're used to hearing that full. All of a sudden, it's bare bones guitar, piano, you know,
Yep.
drums, bass, and it's like, holy smokes! You really got to know the song yourself to be able to execute when
Yep.
all of your cues are gone. You know, the horn lines or the vocal.
So important.
You're not rehearsing with that. All you got to go on is the harmony and,
Yep.
and then the drum, the groove. Yeah.
And you know, we did that for a whole year.
Right.
We played that way for a year just to get those parts and, you know, not have those cues. And that was a challenge up front, but it was. I'll tell you, it was an awesome year.
Yeah.
Because personally, I grew a lot during that time.
I think it took a while for us as a band to get what I would, you know, my standards. I think everybody here, like what we would call good. Where
Yep.
we're tight together. It's consistent, gig after gig. We don't have to play every single day. And I think what's funny is that when you play in a band where everybody has, you know, full-time jobs and lives, you can't spend 8 hours locked in a room together rehearsing every day like Chicago or like a lot of rock bands that make it. They sound really tight because they've been playing. That's their job, and they've been rehearsing together in a basement for so many hours every day. We didn't have that luxury, so it took us a while, I think, to really get to a point, and we're there now where we can just sit back and play, and it just flows, it just goes. It's like the train just starts and then it just kind of goes. You either hang on or you fall off.
It for me, anyways. It's therapeutic because when we come in here and we're in this rehearsal room, everything's focused on the music and the guys around us. Having to listen to one another and play together. You can't be thinking about what happened at work or what's going on with the family. You're focused on the notes you're playing and the guys you're playing with. So it's an amazing. The rehearsal time is a great time for me. I love it.
All right. There's one thing I do want to add because this was an enlightening moment for me. I think it was last year we were doing a gig in the horn section. Steve, Bubba, and Artie. We were doing this song Free, but the band wasn't playing it. We were just trying to get the sound and the mics right. So the horn section was playing the horn parts to the song Free. And I was sitting out in the theater just listening for the mix. And I realized, it's like, holy crap, these guys really know how to play. Not as individuals, but as a unit. And when they were playing it and just blasting it out, it was like, whoa, they're really good. I don't know if it was Steve who said it, somebody said it, that there are nuances to Chicago's horn sound that makes it Chicago. There's not one person in that band of that original 7 that you could say, oh, that's Chicago, that's Chicago, that's Chicago. It's that sound that came together, as I said, that alchemy. And when you hear these guys play in the horn section, it's like, man, it just blows me away.
Yep.
In general, in the early days, we would rehearse as a rhythm section, and then about once a month, the brass would come in. And Jim and I would always drive in together, and we'd look at each other and go, "Hey, bro, the brass coming in tonight?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Nice," because that was the night when it all came together. I mean, you shred the stuff out as a rhythm section, but we had a responsibility to be ready for when our brass section showed up. And man, that was the night that you knew that this was really more fun than anybody deserves.
We're glad you added the horns, right?
Yeah,
Steve?
yeah, because I couldn't rehearse with the rhythm section.
You know.
It's not just the notes on the page. It's actually listening to guys. And for me, it took a couple of years to really, really get into the nuances and listening to the other guys. And it's, the notes on the page may look pretty simple, but when it comes together as a section, there's nothing better. There's nothing better.
One of the things that we're a Chicago tribute band, and there's a lot of tribute bands out there. But what is unique about one thing I think is unique about this group is that we are truly paying tribute to Chicago. No one in this band is performing their interpretation of what Chicago does.
Right.
We're working very hard to imitate Chicago as best as possible, what they did.
Yeah.
So when someone comes to hear us, they're hearing Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what made him famous.
Yeah.
our best compliment is when somebody from the audience comes, and it happens every show. Inevitably, somebody comes and says, "When I close my eyes and I'm sitting out there listening to you guys, I think it's Chicago."
Yeah. Yeah, we've had people say, "Hey, I just saw them in concert last week. I should have just come here."
Yeah.
I mean, that happened at our last.
Yeah, let's last.
That happened in Taunton.
Yeah.
2 different couples. It's like, wow.
And musicians of this caliber usually have egos here and there. Everybody keeps their ego in check. When we come to the rehearsal, we come to a gig, it's like, if you're not one solid unit, you're nothing. So
I
everybody.
give my ego to Rob. Rob has my ego.
There's one thing I do want to say about Bill Edmondson. Bill's right there. First time I saw Bill, he was playing with Stanley in a band called Jet City. Great classic rock band. And I saw Bill playing bass, and I saw him sing AC/DC. And I thought, wow, this guy's a hardcore rocker. And when we needed to fill our keyboard spot, and Bill was interested, I thought, why would he want to play Chicago? And once we got to know Bill, really understood his vast interest in music. And he's done such a great job filling the keyboard spot, filling the Terry Kath vocals, that it's sort of like, it was really enlightening to me to say, because a guy's a hardcore rock and roller doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't want to play in a band that plays Chicago music. That is rock and roll, but it's also, you know, it's got some big ballads, big rock ballads, and it's sort of a eclectic kind of view of music. So Bill impressed the crap out of me when he was like, yeah, I want to do this stuff. I really like this stuff. And it just says that how much this music has expanded, as Marcus said, over the 50 years they've been together. It's really almost timeless at this point.
The best part was when we started learning "You're the Inspiration" and Bill started singing it like Brian Johnson. It's just, we realized then, like, this guy's the real deal. He's a jack of all trades.
But what really sold me was the first show, seeing the bass player with his 12-inch heels and the 6-inch tongue, spitting blood, and then I realized I'm in the wrong tribute band. I don't know how I landed here, but I was 10 miles down the road,
I
actually.
thought you were talking about Rod.
I was doing double
I didn't know you had heels that big.
It's Make Me Smile. There's no other song. It makes me smile every time we play it. Also, you know, the ballet, the long form, but Make Me Smile, to me, just kicks ass.
Yeah, I was gonna say I always struggle with that because people ask me this question, and there's this horn line in "Call." I'm not gonna even say a song. It's really a part of the song called "Call on Me," and there's this horn line that comes in where there's a kind of this famous, Chicago horn section where it's like a scoop, right, Artie? Is that kind of what? Yeah. So it like kind of scoops in, and it has it's just this little 4-note phrase that when they're talking about the horn section being locked in, when they play that lick, and it happens 2 or 3 times in the song, they're so locked in and in tune with each other. It just like I get chill. You get the musicians get this chill down their spine when they hear music that really kind of hits them. And when you play a lot, you don't get. At some point, it takes a while for that to happen. It's not like when you're a kid. That happens for me every time I hear that on a gig. I love that.
How about you, Artie?
I'm with Ray. Make Me Smile is just one of the great shots that just lifts you up. Although with this band, I've discovered a lot of Chicago tunes I didn't know, and that have such incredible horn lines. Free and Mongo and others. They had such a depth of music.
Lalo?
I'm with Ray Jr. I love Calling Me. That's my favorite song.
So what blows me away with Chicago is when I listen to their arrangements, I can't help but think they should have been touted as a prog rock band. When I learned Make Me Smile included, when I learned those tunes, it's the equivalent of learning 5 or 6 tunes. The key changes all the time, the time signatures, they're all over the map, and I'm just blown away with these parts. Even the intro to Does Anybody Really Know What Time It Is?
Right.
It's just, you're playing fourths in the bass. It's like, what are you thinking? And it works. They make it work.
To your point, that's what introduction does for me.
Right.
There's so many parts of that song that are so different and amazing. If one song tells a story of Chicago, it's that one. Amazing song.
But I think Chicago tells its own story. You listen to the early music, and that was a turbulent time for America. And when you listen to some of the lyrics, like I love dialogue. These 2 guys going back and forth, and 3 guys going back and forth about what's going on, and they're hoping that better days are coming for America. I remember being in college with Jim, sitting in his dorm room talking about Chicago, playing Chicago back in the 70s, and listening to that music and looking around and seeing what's going on. And for me, it's dialogue.
Yeah.
I would.
Steve?
For me, it's always Call on Me. That's always the highlight of every show. sorry, I'm not gonna say. The writing is so fantastic. The horn lines are unbelievable. I get to play with some great guys. It just, to me, it's always the highlight.
Introduction for me might be my top choice with all the time signature changes that go on in that and the different sections. It's just a huge challenge, and I could never fall asleep trying to play that. You always have to be on and listening throughout that entire piece.
Call on me.
Yeah.
Or just you and me.
Color My World.
Yeah.
Color My World.
Call My World, Beginnings.
A lot of
If-
prom,
if-
yeah, a
if
lot of
you-
senior proms.
I'm a man.
If you leave me now.
Yes,
Only
I
certain
am.
women, I guess.
And I can't help but tell you so.
All of them.
Free.
Free for us.
For
right?
free.
Introduction.
Introduction
Yeah,
for them.
for us, yeah.
They're,
Take those-
they're hard.
yeah.
Even the ballads are hard. Even when we do Hard to Say I'm Sorry, it's a rock ballad. It's that big 80s rock ballad. To do it well and to really do it well, it's hard.
Chicago gets, well, a lot of bands get a bad rap for their kind of shift into the 80s. But what's interesting about 80s pop music is that there's still very dense songs, specifically harmonically. There's a lot of chord changes. It's not that dissimilar to the 70s Chicago, where, you know, we're
Right.
Bill, I, Rob, and Mark, we're moving through a lot of different harmonies that it's technically tough and mentally, theoretically tough. Those, like Hard Habit to Break, Hard to Say Sorry, they're not much different than that, man. They're hard songs to play, and you know, the songs usually get kind of poo-pooed by a lot of the older original Chicago fans, but in terms of musicianship and having to perform them, they're no different than some of the hardest songs we play, yeah.
This is really interesting because just recently I brought in, I play the drums on Hard to Say I'm Sorry, and I brought in another snare drum, a really deep snare drum, and I tuned it and I had a certain head that I used for it to get that 80s sound. And we've tried using electronics in the past. It just didn't work for us. So, and the rest of the guys in the band, I said, did it sound good? Does it sound right? And everybody was like, yeah, it sounds really good. Because it's got that big doosh, lots of reverb and kind of thing. But it's one of those things where we don't want to overuse it because it's just almost like, I don't feel like if you use it too much, it's not a good idea. But there are certain songs where it really is almost like the calling card of the song to have that big giant snare drum. Steve writes a lot of original stuff, but we haven't done it in this band yet.
Yeah, I think, you know, the focus.
Yeah,
We haven't really expanded our focus, nor should we, I don't think, you know, to really keep it the way it is, you know. We want to have a totally different band name and be the same guys and change our shirts and open up to ourselves, cool, but we haven't done that yet.
One thing I like that's been a hallmark of this band is, you know, enlightening the audience on some of the backstory of Chicago. Like I personally never knew their affinity for the Beatles, and then when Ray talks about that or Stan talks about that, and then we play that, it's totally obvious to me. I just never knew that growing up with these guys, and to hear that backstory is fresh for me every time, and I know it's that way for the audience too.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't know it and I'm playing in a Chicago tribute band, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that didn't know it and walking away with something new and fresh about this band that's been around for 50 years.
You know, here's a funny piece of trivia that Robert Lamb, original keyboard player and composer for Chicago, said that at one time they were considered avant-garde when they first started. I mean, they would open for Frank Zappa and the Mothers. They were like part of that era of the early 70s that were like willing to try anything musically if it had a message, if it was good, if it was innovative, that they were willing to do that. So really the musicianship, the talent, the creativity that's in that band, and this is, you're talking before there was Pro Tools, the fancy software packages, auto-tune. And these guys were like barely 20, 21 years old, just out of college or, really young guys. To play that music the way they played it, with the, ferocious nature, the musicianship, the composition, it's just like, stand back and people talk about, I don't want to even call out any names of quote unquote artists today, but these guys were just in the studio as musicians and composers and ripping the shit out of that early music. To me, that's what music is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a computer program. So that's part of my desire to be able to play, and same with the rest of us.